Hi, this is Jace Gardner October Live here with the first book review in the Summer Slaughter series. Today's book I'll be talking about today, Gone South by Robert McCammon. This is from Pocket Star Books, and this was first published in 1992. This edition is August 1993. This is one of McCann's early 90s novels, and this is actually the second book of his I read from the 90s era. I read Mine, which was, I believe, no, Mine was his first book he wrote in the 90s. This was the second, and then he followed it up with, no, wait. No, sorry. After Mine, he wrote Boy's Life, which a lot of fans like, and I'll have to give that book a try to see what I think of it. But then he wrote this, and sadly, this is the last book he wrote, and then he went on hiatus for a while after having a falling out with a publisher, as he wanted to do this historical kind of thriller series, and the publisher was not interested, so he kind of just took a break from writing before he got back into it again. And Robert McCammon has returned to doing horror and science fiction stuff, but he has yet to do anything of his previous works, which I really like more, like his his 80s stuff I really like. But anyway, I'll talk about that another day. This was a book I heard about, and I have never read it before until I started with my Summer Slaughter 2 series, and this book gets off to like a really good, strong start. Like, I really like the beginning part of this book. The main character, Daniel Lambert, he reminds me a lot of Michael Douglas' character from Falling Down, and Nada from They Live. Just two characters that basically are pushed to their breaking point while they're struggling to try to make ends meet while dealing with personal and social problems with the world around them and stuff. And they kind of, both characters reach their breaking point, and Dan reaches his breaking point in the story. And it was a really good, like, the first two acts where I really enjoyed the book. I was really liking the story. Some of the characters I liked, and then there were some characters I didn't like. Just some really strange and crazy characters in this story. Like, this is one book that has the most strange and craziest characters I've read. But unfortunately, the third and final act of the book was a huge letdown. Like, the whole this book, the third act kind of went down a route I didn't expect it to go, and it was kind of disappointing. The ending does have, like, ends on a happy note for the two main characters, Dan and Argeline Holiday, the woman character he meets. Like, those two characters do end things on a happy note in the story, but there were parts that I didn't like with the ending, and I was like, this has kind of gone to some kind of cliche ending I've seen, like, in movies and stuff, and I was not really impressed with the ending. And there was one character I really didn't like, which was this Elvis imitator character, Pelvis no, Elvis. Oh, Elsley Pelvis. I really didn't like this character, and I'll explain later on my review why I dislike this character. And the one character I really despised in this book was Flint, and I really wanted to see this guy get what's coming to him, and I sadly didn't get that. But despite all that, this is still a decent, like, thriller novel. You can even categorize it as like a road thriller, as there's a lot of driving in the book, and it's still a good, decent book. Like, it definitely has its moments, and one thing I will say that Robert Cannon shines as an author is his writing. He is excellent with his writing. He's got a good writing structure. He's great with pacing. He doesn't add any unwanted filler or scenes that drag on for too long. He knows when to tell it apart in the story, then move on to the next part, and he doesn't waste any time. He just gets right down to it, and he doesn't overuse words. Like, that's another thing I like about Robert Kennedy. He doesn't over-exaggerate words. He just says what he needs to say to get the point, the point, to get to the point in the story, and that I like. Um, which I really do like with Robert Cannon is his writing. He's an excellent writer, very creative, and he loves to add his references in his books, like films, music, TV shows, and stuff. He always seems to, like, put that in his works, and I always like seeing that too. All right. Onto the book review and spoiler alert, as I will give away crucial details within the story. Plot: Daniel Lambert, or Dan as he prefers to be called, is struggling to make ends meet as he's living in a cheap apartment, driving around in his gray 90s Chevy pickup truck with a case of tools looking for work. He served in the Vietnam War and became disillusioned with his government after the horrible things he saw, along with losing his love for red meat since the smell of burnt bodies forever haunts him. Driving through the blazing summer of August in Louisiana, Dan is trying to keep his sanity intact but is on the verge of reaching his breaking point, and his health is getting worse. A failed marriage that led to a divorce in '84, and has been paying his ex-wife Susan for child support and is in a lot of debt. When he reaches the A&A construction company hoping to get a ticket for work, while waiting he chats with Joe, a friend of his, and gives him a bottle of iced tea. Then two ex-Vietnam vets, Curtis and Steve, show up also looking for work. Curtis tries asking Dan how many people he killed during the war and refuses to answer his question, to which Curtis tries bribing Dan by giving him $5, which he replied he killed a lot more than 20, but isn't satisfied and wants to hear more. Dan refuses as Curtis now wants his $5 bill back. Dan rips it in half as both men nearly get into a fist fight, with Joe and Steve keeping the two apart. After waiting hours and not once getting a ticket for work, Dan leaves to go find work elsewhere, but his day is only getting worse. He gets a letter from the bank that his loan on his truck wasn't paid on time and is told to surrender the keys. The next day, Dan visits the loan department at the bank, hoping to work a deal with the loaner he's worked with in the past, Mr. Jarrett. However, Dan learns that Mr. Jarrett has been fired several months ago after a series of bad loans, and Lance Blanchard has taken his place. Miss Duvall, a secretary working at her desk, makes small talk with Dan, understanding his problems, but states that Mr. Blanchard isn't in the office yet and has a very busy schedule, but is willing to wait an hour and try to have a talk with him. After reading through all the magazines, with his anxiety starting to get worse, Mr. Blanchard shows up and is about to take in a waiting client, but Mrs. Duvall tells him that Dan is waiting to speak with him, and as he only wants 2 minutes of his time. Mr. Blanchard agrees, but after he's done with his other client first. When Dan is called into Mr. Blanchard's office, he is already disgusted by his layout of patriotism display of hunted stuffed animals around his office. All the expensive and high-end items just shows this man doesn't care about anyone but himself. Mr. Blanchard goes over Dan's loan record and believes he is here to hand over the keys, but refuses and asks if he can pay him $15 today and pay him the other half by next week. Mr. Blanchard refuses as Dan's blood begins to boil. He tells him about his life problems and that he is slowly dying with a tumor inside his head, which he's got from being poisoned by Agent Orange while out in the jungles, and without his truck he won't be able to get any work. Again, Mr. Blanchard refuses, and Dan snaps in anger. He picks up his chair and smashes the display of dead stuffed animals and begins tearing apart his bookshelf, along with ripping up the patriotism. Mr. Blanchard calls Mrs. Duvall and requests security at once. Dan grabs the phone and smashes against the wall as Mr. Blanchard tries to flee, but is thrown against the wall by Dan. Then a big guard enters as he attempts to remove Dan from his office, but resists as he begins fighting back. Mr. Blanchard yells at Mrs. Duvall to call the police at once. Panic hits Dan as he doesn't want to be thrown behind bars. He breaks the guard's nose and knocks him down to the floor. Dan tries to leave, but the situation gets worse as the security guard quickly reaches for his pistol. He rushes over to the guard and wrestles the pistol. The guard fires off a few shots before Dan takes the pistol, then whacks it across the guard's face. Suddenly, Dan hears a gun click behind him as a bullet passes by his head. He spins around, then squeezes off a few rounds, which mostly hit stuff on the desk, but one shot hits Mr. Blanchard in the neck before he can adjust his aim. Horrified by what he has done, as he didn't plan to kill anyone today, survival instincts took over his actions, as that's he was trained to do in the war. Knowing he'll be charged for murder, Dan quickly flees, getting into his Chevy truck, peeling rubber out of the parking lot. He returns to his apartment, grabbing all the things he'll need along with the remaining money he had left, and flees. Driving for hours on the highway, Dan pulls over after feeling sick. When he removes his sweaty shirt and gets into his truck, he turns on the radio, adjusting the knob till he hears a news bulletin about the shooting at the bank. However, they alter the events of what happened and accused him as a crazed psychopathic killer. Knowing he'll be sent to prison as he doesn't want to die behind bars, Dan plans to escape the law by going through the bayou and can either go to New Orleans or Mexico. Getting back on the road and drives further down till he feels the pain getting worse in his head, pulling over to a church to rest. Meanwhile, bounty hunter Flint Martar is playing a poker game when he gets a call from his boss, Samotos, who runs the Twilight Zone pawn shop, and also runs Dixie Bail Bond and Collectors. Smotos has a job for Flint as he shows him a recorded news footage of Clifford Lyles, the president of the bank, placing a $15,000 bounty for Daniel Lambert. Smotos has his connection with the police and gets all the information he needs. He wants Flint to either capture or kill Dan. He also wants him to take a new recruit with him, Elsley, who's waiting for him at the motel. Joining him is his brother Clint. Flint is against this as he works alone, but is ordered by Smotos to take him or find somewhere else to work. Flint takes the note written down by Smotos and leaves. Getting in his black beat-up '78 Cadillac Eldorado, goes off to meet him. Dan reaches a motel owned by Hannah and her husband Harmon. Dan rents a cabin for the night. Unsure if he should risk seeing his son or just stick with his plan, Dan will decide in the morning. When Flint reaches the motel and meets Pelvis Elsley, an Elvis impersonator who studied detective courses through mail orders. Flint believes this whole thing is a joke and goes to call Smotos and is angered when he learns that he is serious about Elsley and wants him to take him along or he isn't getting paid. Flint returns to Elsley telling him off that he dislikes him and his dog Mama and he's not coming. Without warning, Elsley displays his martial arts, taking down Flint along with Clint. Annoyed and dumbstrung, Flint allows Elsley to come along against his wishes and can't stand the smell of Mama either, angering him even more. Dan goes to call Susan on a payphone next to the gas station. She is shocked but talks with Dan, stating he's all over the news as every cop in the state is looking for him. Dan explains what happened at the bank as they are lying about this whole story of him wanting to kill Blanchard. Dan wants to see his son Chad and Susan for one more time before running off as he reveals that he is dying of leukemia and doesn't want to spend his remaining life in prison. Susan warns him that the police are already watching outside of the house waiting for him and fears they'll be watching every inch of the place till he shows up. But Susan then reveals the bounty on his head as the president of the bank wants him dead or alive. Despite having the odds against him, Dan still wants to risk seeing Susan and Chad one more time and chooses Basile Park as he knows the area very well. Susan finally agrees to his deal. After Fiora's arrest, Dan packs up and goes to leave. However, both Herman and Hannah learn of the bounty on Dan's head and attempt to kill him. When he goes to return the keys in the motel front desk, but Herman suddenly whips out a meat cleaver and Hannah runs in with a double-barreled shotgun. Dan quickly smacks his duffel bag into Hannah, causing her to miss and shoot Herman in the stomach. Dan flees as Hannah runs after him, firing off another shot, blowing out his truck's front tire. Dan hides in the thick forest behind the motel, finding a pile of mannequins that have been used for target practice. Dan pulls off the arm and sneaks his way back to the motel, planning on stealing the station wagon that belongs to Harmon, since he won't have time to return to his truck. Dan sneaks up on Hannah as she reloaded her shotgun and smacks the mannequin arm in the back of her head, knocking her down. He runs over to Harmon, yelling for his wife to help him. Dan takes the station wagon keys. He quickly runs off as Hannah fires off both shots, nearly hitting him as he runs out and gets in the station wagon. Starts it up, but just before he throws the gear into reverse, Hannah runs after him, opens the driver's side door, and tries smashing her shotgun stuck into his head. Dan avoids getting hit in the head as Hannah jumps in while he's backing up the car. Hannah attempts to claw out his eyes. Dan kicks her out of the car, quickly shifts the gear into drive, and slams his foot down onto the accelerator while Hannah runs after him, swearing her head off. Upon return to the hotel, Hannah blames her useless husband for screwing up and decides to handle things on her own from now on, lifting up her shotgun as she rams down the stock, crushing her husband's skull, putting him out of his misery. Later on, Dan reaches Basile Park but doesn't see Susan anywhere. He will wait for 15 minutes, and if she doesn't show up, he's taking off. Dan drifts off to sleep, remembering his days back in the Vietnam War, and is awoken to the sound of a dark red Toyota sedan pulls in. Susan steps out along with Dan as the two have a short conversation, then allows him to spend a few moments with his 17-year-old son, Chad. He's proud to hear he's doing well with his job and looking after his mother. Dan tells his son what really happened that day and not to believe what he hears on the news, as he'll always love him, giving him a hug, saying goodbye. Susan gives Dan some money to help him out, along with a place in the bayou that she visited with Gary, who looks after them and his son. Suddenly, Flint appears out of the darkness, posing as a police officer. However, Dan and Susan know something is off as she refuses to move. Flint attempts to spray Susan with mace, but she knocks him down. Both Dan and Susan flee before Flint can do anything about it. Esley runs over to Flint, helping him up as they quickly run back to his car, chasing after Dan, but loses him as they are forced to pull over after passing by a squad car. Outraged, he lost his target and nearly getting arrested, but Elsley is able to talk their way out with the police, along with amusing them, seeing a Elvis impersonator, letting them go off with a warning. Flint is annoyed that the woman disarmed him and knocked him to the ground as they are wasting time. However, Elsley reveals he was listening in on Dan and Susan's conversation and knows where he's going. Early in the morning, Dan reaches a diner as he pulls over to get himself a cup of coffee to keep himself awake. While waiting, he sees a woman named Arden Holiday being assaulted by her rude boyfriend Joey. Dan can't stand seeing this and yells at Joey to stop. He frightens him to mind his own business but refuses. Joey goes to punch him, but Dan grabs his arm, twists it, and strikes fear into Joey, making him leave. The waitress, who knows Arden, is happy to see someone stand up to Joey and gives him a strawberry pie on the house. Dan accepts, but as he's finished eating, Joey returns and smacks Arden across the face, takes out her suitcase and throws at her, that gets in his Camaro and storms off. Angered by what he's seen, along with the waitress who fears Joey will come back for Arlen, she asks Dan to give her a lift, which he refuses, but just as he's revealing the station wagon, Arlen makes him change his mind. Dan takes Arlen to a nursing home to visit an old family member of hers, Jupiter. After resting a bit in the car, a policeman awakens Dan, telling him he can't park next to a fire hydrant, and moves the station wagon. Another close call. Dan goes inside to see Arlen. When he finds her, Jupiter mistakes him as Mr. Richard, an old friend of his who used to raise horses. Dan goes along with it as Arlen tells him she's going to find the Bright Girl, a powerful woman with healing powers that's deep in the swamp of Lapeer, as Jupiter believes Richards will take her there. Unsure what to make of it, the two agree to travel together. After reaching another motel for rest, things only get worse for Dan when he's framed for the murder of Harmon, with his wife lying on a live news interview, causing the police to step up their search and even contact his mother in Florida, believing he'll be going there next. Outraged by this, and Arlen comes in with a newspaper clip about him. The two have a short argument of what to do next, with Dan frustrated how his whole life is falling apart around him. Dan contacts the police in an attempt to get them to look at the shotgun that Hannah used, as they won't find his fingerprints on it, and to question her further. Dan hangs up as Arlen still wants to find the Bright Girl. With no turning back, Dan agrees to take Arlen. Driving for hours, Dan finds the turnoff that Susan told him about. Suddenly, Dan sees one headlight in his rearview mirror. It's Flint, as he tries ramming their station wagon off the road. Dan rams back, but when he sees a sign warning them to slow down, Dan tries, but the brakes don't work. Flint then tries shooting out one of the tires, which causes Dan to lose control and crash into the river. Flint slams on his brakes, and his Cadillac is hissing smoke under the hood. He backs up to find the half-submerged station wagon, and it's empty as Dan has escaped them again. Flint goes to run after them, but Esley refuses because he doesn't want to ruin his shoes. Flint turns and yells at Esley for causing him nothing but trouble and grabs Mama, frightened to snap her neck, but hesitates and gives it back to Esley. After getting all his gear from the Cadillac, Flint orders Esley and his brother Clint to follow him into the swamp and isn't going to rest till he captures Dan, but Dan swears he won't go down without a fight. Gone South is a thrilling adventure filled with many twists and turns, along with some wild, crazy, and strange characters, highly detailed from the rough and gritty streets of Louisiana to the thick forests of small towns and the blazing hot, gator-infested swamps of the bayou. Many landmarks and locations within the story, along with detailed characters. I always like McCammon's writing style, as he puts in the right amount of detail and doesn't add any extra words to his story, nor add any unwanted filler or dragging scenes for too long, and the pacing in this always kept in the middle where I like it. While I like the main character, Dan, with some other interesting characters within the story, however, there were some I didn't like. The Elvis impersonator, Pelvis Esley, was one of the strangest characters I ever read, as he felt out of place in this story. Only useful in a few moments and some amusing parts, but the rest of the time he's annoying, never stops talking, always complaining about something. There were moments where I thought Flint would kill him or get rid of him, as he was really testing Flint's insanity, and I too wonder what Somoto saw in Esley. Hired an Elvis impersonator to be a bounty hunter turned out to not work for Esley at all, as this guy had no idea what the hell he was supposed to be doing. However, I am thankful that McCammon didn't try adding comedy elements to the story, as that would have ruined it. Flint's brother Clint was a character that seemed to appear and disappear throughout the novel, as there were moments where I forgot Clint was there, as he hardly is brought up during some of the later moments in the story. He doesn't speak and only helps Flint carry stuff, and just felt Clint and Esley were really dragging on the story. I wish Clint could have been more useful and speak than having a man with a third arm who hardly says anything or shown in the story. I also wish McCammon came up with a better character than Esley. Flint Murtaugh was a nasty character who is fueled by his greed for money and enjoys inflicting pain on others. I really despise this character and wanted to see him get what was coming, but sadly that never happens. The rest of the cast I didn't mind, but there were other characters I didn't like or couldn't stand them. There were many moments of action and parts that kept me on the edge of my seat during the first and second act of the novel. However, towards the end is a huge letdown, and after everything Dan has gone through to reach the bayou and nearly killed by Flint during the car chase, when Dan is captured by Flint, who's mouthing off to him, just waiting for him to snap and start beating this guy up or make a move to escape, but nope. Dan is held in a room and handcuffed to the wall, only to be rescued by a group of men who Flint pissed off earlier in the novel, as they free him, taking Flint and Esley as prisoners. And what does Dan do? Go out to rescue them, nearly getting killed in a shootout with a group of drug smugglers. I was so annoyed with this, as I wanted to see a good showdown between Dan and Flint with him getting eaten by a gator, but no, McCammon doesn't go that route. Instead, he does the typical everyone putting their differences aside and agree to letting everyone go and forgiving each other. Not pleased with this at all. While the story ends on a happy note for Dan and Arlen, however, I felt the rest of the third act could have been a lot better. Overall, Gone South is a decent adventure thriller and at times even a road story, since there is so much driving within this novel. It has its moments with a set of both good and bad characters you'll either like or won't. While I did enjoy it, but found it had a similar problem with its third act and the ending, like in Wolf's Hour, which really disappointed me. I was expecting a grand finale but didn't get that. If McCammon put that in Gone South, then this would have ranked higher in my list of favorite McCammon novels. But it's still worth a read to anyone who hasn't heard of this southern thriller. Alright, that is the review today. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, this was a decent thriller. Like, I did enjoy, the first and second act were probably the best moments of Gone South, which I really enjoyed. And even when I was reading this, it also kind of reminded me of The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, and I was like just kind of like thinking like these like '90s thriller movies, and just thinking how great Gone South would have been if it could have been made to a film. But I would like to see some changes made to the third part of the story, of course. But I did enjoy like it. I definitely would put this one above the Wolf's Hour, which, as I said in my review, I had a similar problem with Wolf's Hour. Like the first and second act of Wolf's Hour, it gets off to a real good start, but then the third act, it has this really big disappointment, and it's the ending finale. Really, I felt it sucked. Like, I'm not going to talk about that here. I will say that for the review of the Wolf's Hour, but it just this book just had the same, like a similar thing with that novel, where you're expecting this big grand finale where you want to see Dan get it get into like a wait, let me phrase that. Like, I expected the ending to have like a grand finale where Dan would face off against Flint, and these two would have like this big showdown, like a fist fight or some kind in this like the Bayou Swamps, or on a boat or something as they're fighting. Flint has him, and then Dan like does something to Flint which knocks him overboard and gets eaten by a gator. That's the ending I wanted to see. I want to see that happen to Flint, but sadly I didn't get that. Unfortunately, I was like really disappointed. And there was a moment where Dan was just being like way too calm, where Flint appears and later on in the story, and like this guy, like after all Dan's been through and has been nearly killed by this guy, and then threatened to harm his ex-wife, you're just gonna let this guy just arrest you and mouth off to you? Like, seriously? You're being way too calm there. I was like, when I was reading, actually last night, I finished this book last night because I am now going to read, when I go to read, I'm now going to read twice a day to get through the books more quickly, because that way I don't fall behind again, which it proved to be very helpful last night, as I left off, yesterday I left off on the 240 page mark, and I was just reading last night, and it was very late. I think it was like like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was at the 300 page mark, and I said, fuck it, I'm going to finish this thing tonight, and that's what I did. And then after I was done reading it, and then I finished up writing my review, and I was trying to be careful because I don't want to give away too much. Some people don't like when I give away too much detail in the story, so I try to be careful. But anyway, I just really felt that Dan was being too calm for this, and was just just letting this guy push him around really annoyed me. And then after all this guy puts him through, it does that typical ending thing where after he gets like saved from a bunch of like drug smugglers who are the bad guys in the story, Dad decides he's going to risk his life to save Flint and Elsley because, oh, they're just doing their job. I thought, oh yeah, doing their job of nearly killing you. Yeah, like me, I just said screw them. I'm going to take this opportunity to get away from them. And I really did not like the Elvis impersonator character a lot. I was actually taken back, but I was actually shocked when I read this character. I thought, what is McCammon going with this? Like, what is he doing? Is he? Don't tell me he's gonna put like comedy elements into this. Like, that was one of my concerns. Like, it's like, is he gonna like try to make this story funny with an Elvis impersonator character? I was really just it really put me to like kind of on the fence. Like, I wasn't sure if the book was gonna like, the rest of the book was gonna be good or it was gonna be bad. Luckily, McCammon doesn't go to the comic route, which I'm glad because that would have just really ruined the story. But this character is useless. That's the one thing I'm kind of questioning about. What did Samato see in this Elvis impersonator? Did he think it would be a amusing joke to put on Flint, who is like one of his best bounty hunters, as a joke? I didn't get what this guy saw in this Elvis impersonator character, and I really didn't like him. As I said, he's annoying, doesn't stop talking, he's constantly like eating junk food all the time and complaining about everything, and he doesn't want to get his like Elvis suit ruined. It's like, if you're gonna be a bounty hunter, why are you wearing an Elvis suit? Oh, I just did not like this character at all. And then Flint's brother Clint was another character I didn't like. He just seemed to appear and disappear throughout the novel. So there are times I'm reading it, it's like, what happened to that Clint guy? Oh, there he is, and then he disappears, and then he suddenly reappears again. It's like, where is this character? He just keeps on disappearing and reappearing. It's like, I just really wish McCammon just came up with something better. Like, okay, you want to have like two brothers that are bounty hunters and they're both like brutal savages. That would have been a lot better. And then this other guy could be someone like nasty as they are. That would have been a lot better. But that was sadly not in this book at all. And I also wondered if this book was going to go in a supernatural route because of the bright girl, and I was like kind of curious, like, is this going to add like supernatural elements to it? I'm not going to give away that. I'm not going to give away that part of the story. That's for you to discover for yourself. Because I was like, are they going to try to do what they did to No Country for Old Men, which they added this element of supernatural to it, which really did not fit the story at all, and I really didn't like that. So like this book, it has some things I like with it and things I didn't like with it, but overall, it was a decent read. It's definitely not one of McCann's worst books. I think his worst book is Usher's Passing. I did not like that book at all. I tried that and I didn't get that far in it. I would love to give May 1st another try. I think I just felt it was a little too long for me, but I'm willing to give that book another try. And yeah, as I said, I would put this book higher than Wolf's Hour. That's my least favorite book by McCammon. It's like I said, the first two acts get off to a real good start, but then the third and final act is where it just all falls apart. Oh, and there was, like I said, there's a lot of moments that I enjoy, like the action. There's a lot of like fist fighting in this book, and there was a one scene involves it's a bathroom ball with Flint getting beat up by these drug dealers who take a dislike to him, as this book has a lot of that southern hospitality to outsiders in it. And one part, one of the guys tries to shove Flint's head into an unflushed toilet, which really was really making me disgusted with. Luckily, that his head doesn't get dunked into the toilet, which I'm glad. But it was a really nasty scene in it. And what else? The whole the office scene, I really liked that part as well. And I just really liked when Dan was venting out his anger to the things that he dislikes, and because he's disillusioned with the government, I really felt this was a perfect scene in the book. And the car chase was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that part too, and I was like, damn, this would make one hell of a movie. I was talking to a member on October Library saying I feel it's unfair that this author here and many others have written many good books, yet film studios don't even approach these novels and try to adapt them to films. Instead, it's constantly like the more popular ones, like King, always getting his books adapted to film, but McCann and many others, sadly, are like ignored, and it's not fair to me if you ask me. Like McCann has a lot of great novels that deserve to be adapted to film. So maybe one day, McCann's works will finally get will be adapted to some great films and stuff. Alright, that is it for the review today. Hope you enjoyed it, and sorry this took a little long. Things have just been crazy for me this month. This month has been kind of hit and miss with me. I had some good days and some really shitty days, but I'm finally got this first book done, the Summer Slaughter 2 series, so I'm definitely going to read through the other books as much as I can. I was considering reading two Summer Slaughter books, then going to my other books, then doing it again, but I decided, no, I don't want to do that. It'll just kind of, it'll feel rushed and make me stressed out. So now that I'm done that, now I'm going to actually read two books. Well, one's an anthology, so that's why I'm going to do this. So first book I'm going to read, side by side with another one, Dragons of Light. This is a fantasy anthology edited by Orson Scott Card, and I've always loved this cover. And I'm glad to begin doing some fantasy on this channel, as it's I should have done it sooner, but I'm going to start now. This collection has a lot of stories by many well-known authors, and some I have read, so I'm looking forward to reading this. And while I'm reading this anthology, I will begin with my next book, American Psycho. I recently got the Blu-ray, the director's cut, as there's parts of the movie that actually look really well filmed and stuff. And I actually tried this book years ago, and I ranked this as one of the worst books I read. I'm going to give this book another try. I'm going to try to read as much as I can. I know there's a lot of detail and just a lot of stuff to get through this book, so I'm going to try my best to get through this book as much as I can, and hopefully complete it. Sometimes when I try to reread books, sometimes it doesn't work out for me. Like when I read Vampires, I really wanted to like that book. Unfortunately, I didn't, and gave up on the 300-page mark when I said I'm done with this book. So I'm hoping that I can get through a good chunk of this book and maybe enjoy it. If not, if I don't like it, then I'll post a review of it, of course, and hopefully this will be entertaining as well. Okay. Alright, that's a review. That's a review today. Hope you enjoyed it, and please don't forget to check out October Library, the YouTube channel, and the Facebook group of the same name, a place to post and post and review fiction. Until then, I'll catch you later.